The most powerful thing you can do is master controlled indifference. See, when you go no contact, they expect you to be emotional. They expect you to be struggling, waiting for them, hoping they'll reach out. But when you master the art of detachment while still being present in their awareness, you create something far more powerful: confusion. Because now you're not reacting the way they assumed you would. You're not chasing, you're not bitter, you're not seeking closure. Instead, you're operating from a place of complete control, as if they never had any real power over you in the first place. And that shakes people, that unsettles them, because human nature craves certainty. We like to believe we know how people will respond to us, how they'll react, especially when we think we've had a hold on them emotionally. But when you break that expectation, when you become unpredictable, it forces them to reassess everything they thought they knew about you. Suddenly they're questioning whether they mattered. They're wondering why you're not affected, why you're not running after them like everyone else does. And that's the key. You shift the emotional burden onto them. Now, the mistake most people make is thinking that detachment means disappearing completely. But real power comes from presence without availability. You're still there, you still exist in their reality, but you're untouchable. You're not giving them access to your emotions, your attention, or your validation. You're not reacting to their games, their attempts to provoke you, or their silence. And that's where the real impact happens. Because when they see that you're genuinely unbothered, that's when they start to feel the void. See, people don't value what's easily accessible. The moment they feel like they've lost control over your mind, your emotions, your energy, they start to panic. They start questioning. Did I misjudge this person? Did I lose something valuable? And that's exactly what you want. Because now, instead of you sitting in the pain of their absence, they're sitting in the pain of your indifference. That's the shift. That's the power. And the best part, you don't have to do anything dramatic. You don't need to send messages. You don't need to block and unblock. You don't need to play obvious mind games. Just move in silence. Keep living. Keep glowing. Keep leveling up. Because the moment they realize they no longer have control over your emotions, that's when they feel the loss the deepest. When you become a master of silent self-improvement, you create an energy shift that is undeniable. See, most people think power comes from confrontation, from proving a point, from making someone see your worth. But true power is built in silence. It's in the moments when no one is watching, when you are rebuilding yourself, not out of revenge, not to make them regret, but because you refuse to be anything less than the best version of yourself. And that shift, it doesn't go unnoticed. Now, here's what happens. When you silently level up, mentally, emotionally, physically, it creates an effect that cannot be ignored. The people who thought they had you figured out suddenly don't recognize you anymore. You're not the person they left behind. You're not the person they thought they had control over. And that's unsettling, because familiarity breeds comfort, but change breeds curiosity. And nothing draws people in more than curiosity. You see, when someone walks away from you, when they assume you'll always be in the same place emotionally, they feel secure in that decision. They believe they know exactly how you're handling it, exactly what you're feeling. But the moment you stop being predictable, the moment you stop reacting in the way they expected, that's when the doubt sets in. That's when they start to wonder if they made a mistake. Because here's the truth: people are drawn to growth. They are magnetized by transformation. When they see you glowing, when they see you thriving without them, it creates discomfort within them. It forces them to ask themselves, Did I really know this person? Did I underestimate them? And more importantly, why are they doing so much better without me? And let me tell you, nothing is more powerful than letting your absence speak through your progress. Because words can be ignored, messages can be left unread, but your growth, your transformation, that's something they can't unsee. That's something that lingers in their mind long after you're gone. And that's why silent self-improvement is so powerful. Because when you truly level up, you don't have to chase, you don't have to convince, you don't have to prove anything. They'll feel it. And once they do, they'll realize your absence wasn't just a momentary loss. It was the beginning of a permanent shift. One of the most powerful strategies you can ever master is controlling your emotional reactions. See, people expect you to respond a certain way. They expect you to be hurt, to be chasing, to be proving your worth. But the moment you stop giving predictable emotional reactions, everything changes. Because when you're always reactive, you're easy to manipulate. When someone knows exactly what will trigger you, exactly how you will respond, they can control the entire dynamic. They can push your buttons, get you emotional, and make you act in ways that give them power. But when you take that power back, when you stop being so easily affected, suddenly they don't know what to do. They don't know how to handle the new version of you. See, people don't respect emotions they can control, but they do respect restraint. They respect mystery. They respect someone who can stand in their own power without needing external validation. That's why the moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop engaging in their games, they start paying attention in a way they never did before. Because silence is unsettling. Indifference is confusing. When they can no longer read you, when they can no longer predict your moves, they start to wonder what's going on in your mind. And that's where the shift happens, because now they are the ones thinking about you. Now they're the ones wondering if they miscalculated. And let me tell you something. When someone starts questioning their own decisions, when they start doubting whether they made the right move, that's when they feel your absence the deepest. Not because you begged, not because you explained yourself, but because your lack of reaction forced them to sit with their own thoughts. This is the power of mastering your emotions. It's not about suppressing your feelings. It's about understanding that not everything deserves your response. Because the more energy you give to someone who doesn't value you, the more power you hand over. But when you pull that energy back, when you redirect it into yourself, that's when everything shifts. That's when they feel your absence in a way they never expected. One of the most unexpected yet powerful strategies you can use is unpredictability. See, most people operate in patterns. They expect you to respond the same way every time. They expect you to reach out, to be available, to explain yourself, to react in ways they can anticipate. But when you break those patterns, when you become unpredictable, that's when the game changes. Because predictability breeds comfort. If they know you'll always be there, always respond, always react, they never have to question your presence. But the moment you switch things up, the moment you stop engaging the way they expect, you disrupt their sense of control, and that disruption is powerful. Think about it. When someone is used to having access to you, and then suddenly that access is no longer guaranteed, what happens? They start paying attention. They start wondering. They start second guessing everything they thought they knew about you. And that right there is where the shift begins. See, people only value what they believe they could lose. If you're always available, always explaining, always trying to prove your worth, they don't have to put in effort. They don't have to wonder how you feel because you're making it obvious. But the moment you introduce uncertainty, the moment you create distance without explanation, that's when the dynamic flips. Suddenly, they're the ones who feel off balance. They're the ones thinking, wait, what changed? Why aren't they reacting like they used to? And here's the key. Don't announce it. Don't explain it. Just become it. Shift your focus inward. Move differently. Prioritize yourself in ways that don't require validation from them. Because the second you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop giving them the reaction they expect, they have no choice but to take notice. This doesn't mean playing mind games. It's not about manipulation. It's about understanding your own value and refusing to be predictable in a way that makes you easy to take for granted. Because when they can no longer predict your moves, they're forced to reflect on their own. And that's when they feel your absence in a way they never expected. Silence. It is one of the most powerful tools you have. But most people underestimate it. They think if they're not saying anything, they're not doing anything. But that's not true. Silence is action. Silence creates space. And in that space, people start to hear their own thoughts louder than ever before. See, when you constantly explain yourself, justify your feelings, or try to make someone see your worth, you give them control. You make it easy for them to tune you out because they already know what you're going to say. They don't have to reflect on their actions because you're doing all the work for them. But the moment you go silent, that's when everything shifts. Silence forces them to sit with themselves. It forces them to wonder what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and most importantly, whether they still have a place in your life. And that uncertainty, that's what makes them uncomfortable. That's what makes them start to feel your absence. Most people make the mistake of thinking silence means doing nothing. But silence is doing everything. It's a statement. It's a shift in energy. It's a way of reclaiming your power without saying a single word. Because when you stop engaging, stop explaining, stop responding, you're telling them something louder than words ever could. I am no longer giving you access to my energy. And here's the real power of silence. It creates contrast. When you're always there, always talking, always available, they got used to it. They took it for granted. But when that stops, when the energy shifts, that's when they start to notice. That's when they start to miss what they had. Because here's the truth. People don't feel loss immediately. They feel it in the space where you used to be. In the quiet moments when they expect to hear from you and don't. In the situations where they would normally reach out and suddenly you're not there. And it's in that emptiness that realization starts to hit. So don't break your silence out of impatience. Don't rush to fill the space. Let them sit in it. Let them wonder. Let them realize that your energy, your presence, your voice, those were things they should have valued when they had them. And now they have to deal with what it feels like when you no longer offer it freely. People often think power is about control. controlling the situation, controlling the outcome, controlling how someone else perceives you. But real power is in restraint. Real power is knowing when to step back, when to withhold your energy, and when to let someone feel the weight of your absence without chasing, explaining, or overcompensating. See, when someone expects a reaction from you, whether it's anger, sadness, or desperation, but instead they get nothing, that shakes them. That makes them question everything, because people are wired to expect patterns. They're used to certain responses. And when you break that pattern, it creates a disruption in their mind. It forces them to wonder, why isn't she reacting? Why isn't she chasing? Did she move on? Did she stop caring? And that's the exact moment when the shift happens. The power moves back into your hands, not because you manipulated the situation, but because you understood something fundamental. The moment you stop reacting, they lose control over you. A lot of people get stuck in the cycle of proving themselves, of trying to be understood, of making sure the other person knows how they feel. But here's the truth. They already know. They just don't care enough to change their behavior. At least, not when they think they have you figured out. But when you stop feeding their expectations, when you stop giving them the reactions they depend on, that's when the tables turn. And this is where most people mess up. They think, if I don't react, they won't notice. If I don't say anything, they'll just forget about me. But that's not how it works. People notice when something they took for granted is no longer available. They notice when the energy they depended on is gone. And when they can't predict your next move, when they can't read you like they used to, they start to feel uneasy, because silence creates a void, a space they now have to fill with their own thoughts, their own insecurities, their own questions. And in that space, they start to feel what they never considered before: what life is like without your presence, your validation, your energy. And let me tell you, that realization hits differently when it's self-imposed, when they come to that conclusion on their own, instead of you trying to make them see it. This is the power of restraint. It's not about playing games. It's about showing them that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. That your energy is valuable, and if they don't appreciate it, they don't get access to it. And when you master this, when you learn to control your responses instead of letting your emotions control you, that's when you become truly untouchable. People underestimate the power of unpredictability. They assume that being consistent, always available, and always responding the same way makes them seem reliable, valuable. But in reality, predictability breeds complacency. When someone knows exactly how you'll react, exactly how much you'll tolerate, exactly what you'll do next, they stop valuing you. They stop considering your presence as something special. Think about it. When you're always available, always answering texts right away, always making excuses for their behavior, always responding with emotion, they don't have to think twice about how they treat you. They assume you always be there no matter what. And that's when they start taking you for granted, not because they're bad people, but because human nature works that way. We value what feels uncertain. We chase what feels just out of reach. So what happens when you become unpredictable? What happens when they no longer know if you'll respond, no longer know if you're still thinking about them, no longer have the security of your constant presence? That's when the shift happens. That's when they start second guessing. See, most people react emotionally When they feel neglected, ignored, or unappreciated, they reach out, they explain, they try to make the other person see their worth. But what if instead you became a mystery? What if instead of proving your value, you let them feel your absence? What if you became the one they had to figure out? That's where real power lies. Not in forcing someone to see your worth, but in making them question what they lost, in making them wonder what's changed. Why isn't she reaching out like she used to? Why doesn't she care anymore? Is she moving on? The moment you introduce uncertainty into the equation, the dynamic shifts. Because now they have to work to understand you. Now they have to put in effort to figure out where they stand with you. And when someone has to put in effort, they start valuing what they once took for granted. But here's the catch. This only works when you mean it. You can't fake unpredictability. You can't pretend to be indifferent while secretly obsessing over their every move. You have to truly embrace the mindset of, I don't need their validation. I don't need their attention. I am focused on my own path. And if they want to be part of it, they have to earn that place. Because when you genuinely detach, when you truly stop chasing, stop explaining, stop being so available, that's when they feel it. That's when they notice. And by the time they realize what they lost, you'll already be miles ahead. When you truly master the art of silence, of restraint, of controlled attachment, you gain a power that most people never even realize exists. See, we live in a world where people feel entitled to instant access to your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions. Social media, texting, constant communication. It has trained people to expect immediate responses, instant gratification. But what happens when you remove that? What happens when they no longer know what you're thinking? When they no longer have access to your energy the way they once did? That's when they start to feel the absence in a way they never expected. Most people, when they feel ignored or devalued, react impulsively. They try to force clarity. They try to seek reassurance. They reach out, they explain, they demand answers. But when you do that, you are handing over all your power. You are showing the other person that they control your emotions, that their actions dictate your responses. And the moment they see that, the moment they realize they don't have to work to keep you, they stop valuing you the same way. It's human nature. Now imagine the opposite scenario. Imagine instead of reacting emotionally, you did nothing. Instead of explaining yourself, you let silence do the talking. Instead of chasing, you became a mystery. That silence, that gap, that space you create, it forces them to think, forces them to wonder. It triggers something deep inside them, the fear of losing access to something they once had control over. Because here's the truth, people don't appreciate what's always there. They appreciate what they think they might lose. That's why the most powerful response is no response at all. It's not passive, it's strategic, it's intentional. It makes them question everything. Did I misjudge her? Was she moving on? Is she moving on? That uncertainty is what creates urgency. It makes them see you differently, makes them realize they don't have as much control over you as they assumed. And once that seed is planted, it grows, it lingers, it haunts them in ways that words never could. But here's the part most people get wrong. You cannot fake this. You cannot just act indifferent while secretly waiting for them to notice. You have to become it. You have to truly let go. You have to shift your focus inward onto your own life, your own growth, your own elevation. Because the moment you genuinely stop caring about their reaction is the moment they start caring about yours. That's why silence is so powerful. It's not just about making someone miss you. It's about reclaiming your value. It's about breaking the cycle of always explaining, always proving, always giving someone access to you without them earning it. So when someone starts to pull away, when someone starts to take you for granted, resist the urge to overcompensate. Let silence work for you. Let distance show them what they lost. Let your absence become the loudest message they ever receive. Because when you learn how to do that, when you master that level of control, you stop worrying about whether someone values you. You know your worth, and that changes everything. People underestimate the power of emotional discipline. They think strength is in reacting, in proving a point, in making sure the other person understands how they feel. But true strength, true power, it lies in your ability to control your emotions rather than letting your emotions control you. See, most people live in a reactive state. Someone upsets them and they lash out. Someone pulls away and they chase. Someone ignores them and they feel the need to explain themselves. But what they don't realize is that every time they do this, they are giving their power away. They are letting the other person dictate their emotions, their actions, their sense of self-worth. And the moment someone realizes they can control you emotionally, they stop respecting you. It's an unspoken truth that most people never acknowledge. The people who have the most influence in any situation are not the ones who are loudest, not the ones who are most reactive, but the ones who remain composed, controlled, and unbothered. Because emotional discipline does something that words never can. It creates uncertainty in the other person's mind. It makes them question their assumptions about you. It makes them realize that they don't have the access to your emotions that they once had. And that is what makes them take a step back and rethink. Now, let's be clear. Emotional discipline does not mean suppressing your feelings. It does not mean pretending you don't care when you do. What it means is mastering the ability to process your emotions internally rather than dumping them onto someone else in a desperate attempt to be understood. It means understanding that not every action needs a reaction. Not every comment needs a response, and not every situation requires you to prove your worth. The problem is we've been conditioned to believe that if we don't react, we are weak. That if we don't defend ourselves, we are letting someone win. But what people don't understand is that real power is in restraint. Real power is in knowing that you don't have to prove anything to anyone because you are already secure in who you are. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone lose their composure and instantly lose credibility? How many times have you seen someone get emotional, defensive, or desperate only to push the other person further away? That's what happens when you lack emotional control. You may think you are standing up for yourself, but in reality, you are just showing the other person that they have the ability to dictate your emotions. Now, imagine the opposite scenario. Imagine someone tries to provoke you, and instead of reacting, you stay calm. Instead of engaging, you walk away. Instead of explaining, you let your silence do the talking. That is when the power dynamic shifts. That is when they start to feel uncomfortable, when they start to wonder why you are not reacting the way they expected. And that is when they start to respect you. Because people respect what they cannot control. They respect what they cannot predict. They respect those who have mastered the ability to remain composed no matter the situation. And when you develop that level of emotional discipline, everything changes. You stop feeling the need to chase, to explain, to prove your worth. You stop letting people's actions dictate your self-esteem. You stop wasting energy on people who do not value you. Instead, you become someone who commands respect simply by how you carry yourself. That's why emotional control is one of the most powerful skills you can develop. It changes the way people see you, the way they treat you, and most importantly, the way you see yourself. Because when you no longer need external validation, when you no longer allow others to control your emotions, you become truly unstoppable. Most people never realize the power of patience. They think strength is in immediate action, in forcing outcomes, in making things happen right away. But the truth is, real power lies in your ability to wait, to resist the impulse to react, to let time do the work for you. See, the people who struggle the most in relationships, in business, in life, are the ones who don't know how to be still. They panic when things don't go their way. They chase after people who are pulling away. They force conversations that don't need to be had. They demand answers before the other person is even ready to give them. And in doing so, they weaken their position. Because nothing repels faster than desperation. Nothing makes people pull away more than feeling pressured, feeling like they have to respond, feeling like they have to give you something they aren't ready to give. But patience, that changes everything. When you are patient, you give off a different energy. You don't look like someone who is waiting on them. You don't look like someone who is dependent on their validation. You don't look like someone who needs them to make a decision right now. And that's what makes them rethink. That's what makes them notice. That's what makes them wonder. Because patience creates space. And space creates curiosity. And curiosity pulls people in. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone walk away from a situation and instantly become more desirable? How many times have you seen someone step back and suddenly the other person starts to miss them? That's not a coincidence. That's the power of patience at work. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think patience means waiting and suffering. They think patience means sitting by the phone, hoping, obsessing, checking, and overanalyzing. That's not patience. That's self-torture. Real patience means trusting yourself enough to let go. It means keeping your focus on your own life, your own goals, your own happiness, so that no matter what happens, you are still moving forward. Because the truth is, the moment you stop forcing, you start attracting. The moment you stop chasing, you start receiving. The moment you stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-giving, you start to create a presence that draws people in instead of pushing them away. And that's why patience is so powerful, because it sends a message without you ever having to say a word. It tells people, I am not desperate. I am not waiting for you to decide my worth. I am not afraid of losing you, because I know I will be okay regardless. And that kind of confidence, hmm, it's magnetic. People are used to getting immediate reactions. They are used to knowing exactly where they stand. They are used to feeling like they have control over how you feel, over what you do next. But when you have patience, when you stop reacting, when you stop trying to control the situation, you shift the dynamic. Suddenly, they are the ones wondering. Suddenly, they are the ones checking. Suddenly, they are the ones feeling the absence of your energy. Because patience does something that no amount of words ever can. It forces people to sit with the reality of losing you. It forces them to see what life feels like without your presence, without your energy, without your attention. And when someone truly values you, that absence will be felt deeply. But here's the key. Your patience has to be real. You can't fake it. You can't pretend to be unbothered while secretly checking their every move. You can't act like you don't care while hoping they notice. That's not patience. That's manipulation. And people can feel that energy. True patience means surrendering the outcome. It means trusting that if something is meant for you, it will come back. And if it doesn't, then it was never yours to begin with. And when you operate with that level of self-trust, you stop feeling anxious about what other people are doing. You stop feeling desperate for answers. You stop needing immediate validation. Instead, you live your life fully, knowing that whatever is meant for you will always find its way. Because patience is not about waiting, it's about knowing your worth. It's about holding your space. It's about understanding that you don't have to force what is already yours. And when you embrace that truth, everything starts to fall into place exactly as it should.